Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Alicia, your host, and today I wanted to talk about how to sight read in 5 minutes a day. This is a problem that a lot of people have. It's one of the most common questions I get asked in my piano lessons. In the classes that I teach, I always require 5 minutes of daily sight reading. And a lot of people panic about this, especially because I don't give particularly easy sight reading assignments. So I wanted to demystify this a little bit. I wanted to take away some of the fear and anxiety and confusion that comes along with the idea of having a daily routine and a very short daily routine of sight reading practice. This short routine is something that I would recommend to beginners and intermediate students alike. I don't think there's any need for anyone to do more than this if you're just kind of like a casual student. So let's get to it. So why do so many piano students struggle with sight reading? I think the number one reason for this is basically an assumption that you have to be perfect at whatever you're trying to sight read. But that's not the intention of sight reading. So let me mark a clear distinction between the kind of piece that you're practicing, that you want to get good at, and sight reading, because those are two completely different things. On the one hand, you have a piece that you're going to come to every single day. You're going to work on it. You're going to develop muscle memory. You're going to get faster and faster at it, and ideally get to a place where you're actually like pretty happy with how it sounds. Sight reading has nothing to do with that. Sight reading is just like the rote practice of reading notes on a page and translating it through your hands. Let the cards fall where they fall. Sometimes this is going to go really well, and sometimes it's going to go really poorly. But what I see people do is, if it goes poorly and you hit the 5-minute mark and you're like, oh, I can barely even play it hands separate, they just keep going and they keep going, and then 20 minutes later they're like, okay, I finally have something workable. But that's not what we're doing with sight reading. We're not trying to master a piece of music when we're sight reading. We're just using it to keep the wheels turning, to input fresh material for you to churn over and attempt to interpret, with the idea that the more times you do this with regular practice of seeing new music, trying to figure out how to play it, and stopping when we hit the 5-minute mark, that's going to actually improve your ability to spontaneously read, and you will get better at it over time. But it should be a little bit uncomfortable. It should be a little bit of a challenge, and you don't need to have something that sounds like music when you finish. So that's the biggest problem that I find that people encounter with their sight reading, and the biggest thing that I want you to get over yourself. So when you sit down to do sight reading, set a timer for 5 minutes. Literally set a timer if you're apt to be a perfectionist, and get to it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you basically a weekly series of exercises that you can do for sight reading. And this is appropriate for someone who's been playing for less than a year or two, so a beginner can do these. I actually took these sight reading exercises you're about to see from the CPPA class that I teach. And the format is almost identical. It's a couple pages which you can download as a PDF of 5 different exercises, with the intention that there's one exercise to be done per day. And I'm going to take you through it, and I'm going to just kind of walk you through the process of how you might spend those 5 minutes sight reading. So let's hop to the keyboard. All right, so I'm going to take you through the first of these sight reading exercises so we can map out precisely how to deal with it. Okay, so first of all, most important thing is you want to scan through your music. If you were actually getting examined on your ability to sight read, they'd give you 10-ish, 15-ish seconds to look through the music. But try to you've got 5 minutes, so spend like a good 30 seconds visually glancing through the music. Okay, so figure out, I'm starting on a C, and the highest note that I'm going to play if I scan through looks like it's going to be a G. So it looks like for this little piece, I can have my hand position stay put in the upper C position. Now, if I take a look at my left hand, well, it looks like the lowest note is going to be a C, and the highest note, if I scan through, oh, it's also going to be a G. So I've got C position in both hands. It's a really nice arrangement for people who've been playing for a shorter amount of time. We've got some eighth notes to deal with. So I'm just going to scan through just to get a feel for the rhythm. That's a really common rhythmic pattern in this one. Okay, now I'm going to do it hands together all at once. I recommend everyone do the same unless it's a really, really difficult sight reading exercise. For the most part, though, we're playing piano with 2 hands, so we want to sight read with 2 hands also and practice that. But I'm not just going to come out of the gates and do what I think the top speed should be. I'm going to go absurdly slow. I'm going to go so slow that I'm like 98% confident that I'll be able to get through it start to finish without any mistakes. So for someone who's been playing for short amounts of time, maybe it's going to be something at approximately, you don't need to use a metronome, but just so we can kind of stay on track. Da, 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 da. 60 beats per minute. Let's try that. Ready and go. And. And you might find things start going awry. And if you start to hit a wall where things start going awry, maybe you started too fast. Maybe 60 beats per minute was way too ambitious. If you get to that mistake, what I would encourage you to do, as much as possible, unless it starts really going off the rails, try to push through the mistake. Imagine that there's a bar line that's guiding you through the music and it's not stopping. So it's going to keep going regardless of whether or not you keep up. Try to keep up with that invisible progress bar as much as you can, because when you're sight reading, it's better to sort of like miss a few notes but jump back in than to stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. Because then what's going to happen is you're going to get really good at the first few measures, but then you're going to have to slow down to figure out what comes next. And what we want is everything to be as equal as possible, even if it's done sort of poorly. So maybe that means we start something more like 40 beats per minute, and then so forth. When we get to that third measure, that gives us enough brain space to think through 1 and 2 and 3 and look ahead. Then we can kind of keep reading through. We have enough time to scan what's coming up ahead. And to, even though these quarter notes feel extremely slow, they give you time to contemplate your next steps and notice, whoa, there's a little skip, and make those micro adjustments as you go. Now, let's say you were playing at that speed and it still went totally off the rails. And you started messing up like crazy. Try to keep following it. 1, 2, and 3, and okay, I'm going to jump into measure 5. Even if you kind of have to stop and jump back in, that's what I would encourage you to do. So again, the main goal with sight reading is to not finish the 5 minutes having done a perfect playthrough. The goal with sight reading is to try to get from the start to the finish as smoothly as possible and not stop and start. We want to try to, the progress bar starts, it's not going back. We're just going to keep moving forward, regardless of if we're hitting a bunch of wrong notes along the way. Now, 5 minutes is actually a long time for 8 measures. So you're maybe now sitting, it's been 3 minutes. You did 30 seconds to look through the notes and about 2-ish minutes to actually play it really slowly. So now you got a few minutes left. What you can do is, if you went really off the rails, you hit a bunch of wrong notes, try it again, but slower. Because now that you've played it through, you probably have a little bit of a better understanding of what to expect on the way through. And you can think, okay, well, that was an ambitious tempo. I'm just going to take the tempo down a notch and I'm going to play through it again. You should be able to have enough time to play through a sight reading excerpt 2 to 3 times in 5 minutes. Again, 5 minutes is going to feel like a long time for this. And that's it. That's all you again, we're not trying to practice it. We're not trying to sit down and spend 10 minutes. I'm going to get really good at this excerpt by the end. I'm going to keep drilling it until I'm a master at whatever it is on the page. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to observe all the details and get to the finish line and not stop and start. 2 to 3 playthroughs, totally sufficient. Okay, so one more quick note on details. I have various details embedded within these examples to give you a little bit of a diverse palette. So for example, in the second one, we have a piece which requires dynamics. And I know the temptation when you're sight reading is to ignore them because you're like extremely fixated on the notes. You got your hands in position. You're going to be just sitting with those quarter notes, not really wanting to think about if they're loud or soft. But I would encourage you to try to read the dynamics. If you feel like it's too hard to do the dynamics, you're playing too fast. So play slower. If you need to go for this quarter note, like, I don't know, 56 beats per minute in order to successfully navigate the dynamics, something like that, then please do that. That's the ultimate goal. And with an excerpt like the fifth one, we have some, actually the first one too, we have slurs marked in. So the idea is that you want to be able to capture the detail of the slur. Chop, chop, then we're smooth to chop, then this whole part is smooth, then we lift. So you want to be able to observe the detail work of the slurs while you're sight reading and not just get hyper fixated on the notes and rhythm only. You basically want it to sound like as accurate of a capsule of the piece as possible, but like extremely slow. And that's like kind of the broad advice I would want every single one of my students and beyond, all of you, to observe when you're sight reading. Okay, so that's the general idea of how to approach a sight reading assignment. As I mentioned, the resources that we've been looking at in today's session are provided in the link below. So check that out. You can download the PDF of these 5 sight reading exercises. But of course, 5 sight reading exercises are only going to get you through 1 week, and you're going to want a more steady diet of sight reading exercises to do. So where can you get them? Well, I mean, I provide them in my courses. So if you, those of you who take courses with me, you'll know there are, for every week of classes that I teach, there's basically a new handful of sight reading exercises for you to do. So it takes the guesswork out of that. For those of you who aren't in my classes, there are lots of options. You can get the 4-star sight reading books if you want something more formal. But I actually think the easiest thing to do is just make sure you have easier music on hand that you haven't tried to play before. And book collectors among us will have ample resources for this. But the general rule of thumb is you want to sight read music that's about 2 levels easier than what you're currently at. So if you're a grade 3 student, you want grade 1-ish level music to sight read. If you're a beginner student, you want like the most beginner, like if you barely played piano, find like the most basic book for small children that you can find, and that would actually be a really good resource for sight reading for you, as tongue-in-cheek as that might sound. So a lot of us already have stuff like that sitting on our shelves. There's a lot of freely available sheet music online. Folk music works for this, but I actually think the best type of music to sight read is the kind of music that you don't know, like you don't know the sound of, because the idea is that we're training our reading and interpretation abilities, not our ability to like match the tune that we already know to the keys, right? That's a different skill set. That's more in the ear training camp. All right, thanks so much for watching today's video. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I would love if you would share your suggestions and tips for sight reading. What's worked for you? What is a big challenge that you have with sight reading? This is basically a community with a ton of really interesting and awesome people. So I would love to solicit any advice and just hear about your experiences with sight reading, because I'm certain that if you share something, there's someone else who's going to be in the same boat as you and who will kind of understand where you're coming from. And then we'll realize we all have the same problems. We're all in this together. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.